Subtracting whole numbers and fractions. Our first problem is 5 take away 6/7. When we set up a subtraction problem with a whole number and fraction, we keep the whole numbers to the left and the fractions to the right. So when I write this problem, I'm going to write 5 take away 6/7. So I have whole numbers on the left and fractions on the right. If you remember, when we added decimals, sometimes we had a problem that might look like this: 2 plus 0.5. So when I wrote this problem out, I would write 2, and then I'd have 0.5, and what did I have to do? I had to add a 0 here before I could add. So I've added, I'm going to get a different color here, I had to add a 0 here as a placeholder, and I had to add a 0 here as a placeholder. The same thing is happening with fractions. I have to add a 0 here, and I have to add a 0 here. Now, when I add the 0 for the fraction, it's pretty simple. I'm just going to add a 0 here. So that's easy, and that's done. The top 0 for my fraction, right here, takes a little bit more thought. I know that I need to have common denominators. So when I write my 0, I'm going to use the denominator 7 because I'm already using that in my problem. So I'm going to have a 7 here, and then I'm just going to write a 0 above it. That way it won't create any more work for me later on. Let me erase this. Now that we have our problem set up, we can solve. I know that I can't have 0 and take away 6. This means I have to borrow, just like I've done before in other subtraction problems. I'm going to borrow from the 5 and make it a 4. I'm going to borrow a 1, and I'm going to bring it over here as a whole number, because it is a whole number. Now I have a mixed number, 1 and 0/7. I'm going to change that to an improper fraction. 7 times 1 equals 7, and 7 plus 0 equals 7. So my numerator is 7, and my denominator is 7, which equals 1. And that makes sense because that's what I borrowed. The next step is to just rewrite 6/7 because we're going to keep that as our fraction. Now I can subtract. 7 take away 6 equals 1, and my common denominator is 7. Check to see if you can reduce. I cannot. And now it's time to subtract my whole numbers. 4 take away 0 is 4. My final answer is 4 and 1/7. 2 take away 4/9. I write 2 take away 4/9. And now I have to add my zeros. I'm going to put a 0 here for a placeholder. And then how many ninths do I have up top? 0/9. So I've set up my subtraction problem. Now I can't have 0 and take away 4, so I'm going to have to borrow from the 2. I borrow from the 2, which gives me a 1, and I've borrowed a 1. I'm going to put that 1 right here as a whole number. Now I have a mixed number. I'm going to change that to an improper fraction. 9 times 1 equals 1. 9, sorry, equals 9. And 9 plus 0 equals 9. So I have 9 over 9, take away 4 over 9 equals 5/9. Now I can subtract 1 take away 0 equals 1. And that is my answer. Next question. 13 take away 3/5. I write 13 here, take away 3/5. And to set up my problem, I'm going to have to put in placeholders where we have nothing. So under 13, I'm going to write 0 because it is 0 and 3/5. Now, up here, I don't have a fraction, so I have 0 out of something. So I'm going to write 0 out of 5 because I want to have common denominators, and I have a 5 on the bottom. So now I've set up my problem and I can solve. I can't have 0 and take away 3, so I'm going to borrow from the 13. I borrow from the 13, it becomes a 12, and I borrowed a 1. So I'm going to bring that 1 over here as a whole number. Now I can just change this to this mixed number into an improper fraction. 5 times 1 is 5, plus 0 equals 5. So I have 5 over 5, which makes sense because that equals 1. And then I'm going to have 3/5 here. And 5 take away 3 is 2/5. And 12 take away 0 equals 12. Next, 1 take away 7/8. So I'm going to write my problem 1 and then 7/8. Now I need to add some zeros for placeholders. I'm going to put a 0 here. And here I have nothing for my fraction up top. So I'm going to make it 0, and I'm going to use 8 so I have a common denominator. Now I can't have 0 and take away 7, so I have to borrow from the 1. So I borrow from the 1, it turns into a 0, and I carry the 1 over here. So now I have a mixed number. And 8 times 1 equals 8, and 8 plus 0 equals 8. So I have 8/8 equals, and then take away 7/8, which is going to give me 1/8. And 0 take away 0 equals 0. So I can just write 1/8 as my final answer. Thank you for subtracting whole numbers and fractions with me. This is Mrs. Smith signing off. Have a great day.